Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Instructor Phil here. We're going to be going over the tonal studies, and then out of your 4 tonal studies, you're supposed to pick the one that you like the most and start doing a rough comp of that. And then based off of today's lecture, you're going to go into that and sort of develop your work a little bit more. So some of you guys were a little bit behind last class where you didn't have all the 4 tonal studies done. And that's really important that you guys get them all done, because if they're not, you haven't really thought about the advantages or disadvantages of enhancing your composition with your light studies. Okay, so anyway, let's take a look here. So let me just sort of zoom in here. We have everybody's work lined up. Okay, Jarek. Okay, so this way it's so much easier for me. I can look at everything like this. These studies look nice. Okay, they look pretty good. I really like this one in the down left-hand corner. This one looks great, the one you decided to use. I like this over here. It looks like you struggle a little bit there on the nighttime.
Yeah, I don't like the composition I set up. Purple and nighttime scene, there's the light shining out the focus on separate areas.
Yeah. So here's the problem with the night scene, and see if I can't give you a little bit. I want to cover it even though this isn't the one that you use, right? The secret to a night scene is having one area of interest. Because if you have lights on in the foreground, the background, everywhere, it becomes too overwhelming, right? So one thing that you can do, and I sort of had this feel over here, is if I come over here, and if I'm going to pretend that in your night scene, I'm going to have all these buildings that are sort of like over here. I'm going to pretend I'm going to light them up, so I'm going to come in here, start to brighten up some of these elements in here. So I'm going to pretend like all these lights are on, and this is like a busy part of town, and there's a lot happening in here, and there's like a little party going on here, and you have lights coming in there, you have light from this window, and I'm basically would come in and take the approach of lighting up this whole just downtown little area, this little strip down here, and then by getting all this light coming, and you even have some little bit of like haze coming out the windows, and then the lights coming down here, some of the light might bounce back in here, it might lightly end up sort of down below a little bit, right? This becomes the lit area all of a sudden in part of your composition. Let me switch back to another brush there. So if we come back here, and let me get those other windows up here. So you want to have that feel that like everything inside, that's not even a pure white, which I just realized. Let me go to a pure white now. You know, this building and everything that's happening here, this is like your casino, right? This is like all of the town, everything's just going off here, it's super busy. You want that to be like one main visual read. And then by getting that visual read in here, it makes things a little bit more easier to look at, because the eye is going to go over here. You have a little bit of haze coming off some of this. All this area is sort of lit up down here. Let me put a little bit of fade that's coming down. So boom, it looks like that's a nighttime scene. There's a lot happening here. I would even probably push some of your values down back here to get a little bit more contrast. So that's going to be like a shaded area in there, even back on part of this. And part of that shaded area is going to fall into here. Let me, switch to sort of a black. I might fade the black off a little bit here, darken a little bit of this side here, fade some of that, get a little bit on that side roof. Okay. That way, my focal point becomes those buildings in that area. So anytime you work with a night study, doesn't matter if the light's on in a house, but then you have a light on a tree, and then another light on tree, I meant to say like a tall lamp of some kind, and there's another light on in the background. The problem is with the night studies, there's so much contrast, the eye starts to focus on everything. And by coming in just sort of quickly with this nighttime area, and you start to define all of this in here, you have these little square little tops, right? They're going to get hit by those light sources. You might have some of the edge rails like in here. They're going to get hit by part of the light. Then you have some of the light might cast down here. Some of it comes onto the boats a little bit, you know. Then you start thinking about all this area that's going to get hit by part of that light. You have that little dock. Some of that's going to come this way. Some of it might blend into here a little as well, like that. So if I hide that, We go back to our brush, and I sort of, oops. Let's go back to white. If I lightly come in here and punch some of this area up here and make it look like this whole part of the town is really lit up nicely, you know, all of a sudden you can see where your focal point is there, right? So that's just a little hint. At night, you can, you know, you look at this, you have the dark against the light, you look over here, you know, heck, you can even come over here. Since this is an alleyway, right now that value of that alleyway is the same value as there, right? So if I flip that over, and if I put a little bit of shadow in between here, remember the alleyways are like dark a little, right? Maybe these lights aren't as bright, so I can get a little bit more gradient effect that's happening, that's coming over like that. Even part of that building might be a little gradient controlled. And then even from here you have an overhang, right? That overhang is going to be a little bit darker as it comes out. So now you really get a feel for where the focal point is. Your eye is going to go right there. And when we look at the difference, you see that? We're lighting up one part of town. So whenever you do a light study, whether it's moon, whether it's lights inside, outside lights, whatever, just try to keep your eye into one area, and everything becomes secondary. The biggest mistake students do is they come over and then they start coming over here and they go, okay, well, hey, this light's on, so I'm going to put light on there, and this light's on here, and this light's on back here, and that one's on. Oh, and this building's lit up here. Now all of a sudden you've killed the piece because you put highlights all over and there's nowhere for the eye to go. There's no dominant read. So what you can do is, if you wanted to, what I just did, I should have did it on a second layer. These can be like a secondary read, just one little dot of light. You know what I mean? I can come back here and I could say that, you know, by putting it on another layer, I always drop the opacity when I'm done. I could say, hey, there's a, you know, there's the governor's ball that's up in there and it's something important that's going on. So I might punch up a couple of those light sources and then just sort of give this breathing light feel like that just by hitting it with a round fuzzy brush. And then since it's on another layer, I can adjust the opacity and I could drop it down to fit into the scene. The other thing too, what I was doing here with the dark values, right? In a nighttime shot, your sky is going to be pretty dark unless there's light reflecting up into it. So I would also come in here and just, if I put a little bit of a gradient on top of that sky, do you see that? In fact, if I just go over the whole piece, put a grade and sort of fade it down, again, it locks me back into this little area that's right in here, right? So I just thought I'd mention that because it's important. Those studies are a little harder to do because you really have one dominant light source in there, okay? Anyway, with that done, let's jump back over to here to your finished piece that you're working on. And I wish there was a medium and large. Well, I think there is if I just use the navigator. I'm just not a navigator fan. Hold on, let me bring it up really quick. Navigator, see if I can get it to be, there, that's not bad like that. And a little bit more. So overall, I like this. It looks nice. It's coming across very well. One of the things that throws me when I first looked at it was this. Let me draw on top of it with a red pen real quick. Okay, is this the tree you have? Okay, this right here, you're getting this weird funky thing around that tree. Do you see that? Not funky thing. Let me describe it in more detail. It's the way these leaves are getting hit right in here. See that? It feels more like a graphic element and the highlight's a little bold. If I was you, I might cheat some of this. And the feel I like is when I look into this, I feel like the light's coming down at an angle and your major highlights are going to be here. They're going to be on top of these guys here. And then it's going to be on some of the water here. That way you keep this locked into that point of detail. And to me, that's the most detail in your piece. But you get a lot of contrast and white area up here in that tree. So what I would do is, I don't think the tree would go that light, because remember, trees tend to be like a dark brown or dark green, right? Depending on the leaves, and then they have little speckles of highlights. So you can come back and put those speckles in, but again, you don't want me to be jumping back up here to focus. You want to keep my eye focused down on pretty much this little area of goodness that you have in here, right? So I think all I would do is I might come in there and just brighten up a couple of those highlights, and that would be it. I would call it for that tone. Hold on. Oh man. Hold on. Delete. One thing that's driving me nuts when I'm here at school, for some reason the preferences always get lost. Whenever we restart the machine, I think we have that deep freeze software or whatever, because I'm just losing. My undos right now are like 25. Let me see if I can adjust those really quick. Sorry, give me 1 second. Keyboard shortcuts, preferences, general, interface. Where's undos? File handling, performance. Is that it? Yeah, there it is. History states, history cache. Let's go up higher. Let's go like 90. Dedicate a little bit more of that to that. Okay, and hit OK. There we go. Okay, that should be a little bit easier. All right, so what I was talking about this, I think you're just a good candidate. Get some nice highlights coming in here, and you have some cool little areas you can do. Let me let you guys in on a little trick, okay? Little thing that I do for highlights sometimes. Sometimes it's really hard with my brush. If I'm painting with a brush, with this brush right here, and if I shrink this guy down and I try to get a highlight in, right? It's still going to be very hard for me to get that highlight in. And if I shrink this guy down quite a bit, if I get him down to a size like this, it's still going to be hard for me to get a nice gradated highlight in there, okay? But what I can do is I can get a really bright highlight going like that. And little trick, I can hit transform, okay? Not on the whole layer. Take your marquee tool, deselect, bring your marquee, hold on a minute. So if I bring my marquee right over that guy, watch, and I hit transform, see I can scale that down. Now I have a pristine little highlight there. Do you see that? So that's a beautiful little highlight that if I got into certain little areas, it might make it harder for me. So I'm going to copy that right now and put it in the computer's memory. That way I have it. So now I could take that highlight, see, and I could rotate it like this. And I could come in here and I can put it right on the edge of that dock right there. Do you see that? I can get it rotated, edge it up a teeny bit, bounce it off about right there. Boom. Hit deselect. Now I have a nice little crisp highlight on that edge, okay? That little process, I invented a term for that. I call that minimizing. It's when I paint something at a larger size, I scale it down and I plug it into where I want it, okay? So even with that, see, it's in the computer memory right now, right? Because I hit Command Copy. So I could take that highlight now and I could put it everywhere. So watch, let me zoom in another notch. I could come over here. I'm going to transform this. I'm going to bring it down a little bit skinnier. That's what's great. It's in the computer memory. I want to let the computer work for me, right? So if I hit transform, I'm going to rotate this to about right here, okay? I'm going to get it set about right there. And then while I'm in that, I'm going to zoom in real quick to get my cursor inside here. Once you're in the transform setting, you can still come in here and you can right click then inside your setting box and you can tell it to warp. See that? So what I did is I put a little box around it now. So now I could come in here and I can grab certain points. Now I need to zoom in a little bit more. I start to get some pixels in here. So if you look, this allows me to like come over here and put that edge there. I can put that little notch there. There's 4 little sections to a transform, right? Excuse me, to a warp. So I'm going to move these little points in, get those in where I want them. I'm going to come over here then, sort of put that down about there. I'm going to grab these little points, bend that back in here. Okay, grab that little point right there. Bring that back. I can bring this in. Oops. Like that. If I hit enter right now, see that? I just put a highlight on the edge of the boat by copying and pasting it. So now if I zoom out of that, see I have that wonderful teeny little highlight right there. And the great thing is if it's a little too bright and I don't like it, I pasted it, it's on another layer. So I can come in here and lightly dull it down just a teeny bit like that. Or I can leave it at full. Sometimes what I do is I come back into my eraser, I take a soft eraser like this, or I like to use this as one of my common erasers, this little guy. I drop down to like a 10%, or let's say 50, and then I can come along part of the edge and I can clean it up and make it a little smaller to fit on that perfectly. So that might take you a couple minutes. You can even break the highlight. See, it might take me a couple minutes to get that in there, but it's done and it's simple. There I have a highlight. Now watch, I come back here, I hit Control Paste again, boom. There's my highlight. I can come back over here. Okay, watch this one. He has some metal up here. I'm going to stretch out the highlight a little bit more. I'm going to compress it down into itself a little bit like this. I'm going to get it up to about right there. I'm going to hit transform. I'm going to flip it upside down because the sun's coming down. It's going to hit that lip of that overhang, right? And then I'm going to go back. Remember, I don't have to hit. I just right click inside the box. I can go to warp. And now I can take this and I can move this accordingly. Now, it's harder for me to move it because I need the base of this to be right here along that edge. See that? Like right there. Now I hit transform, right click on it, come over to warp, and I'm just going to do the same thing. I wish it was a little bit easier, but you have to grab all these little points. It doesn't take too long. You have to grab the Bezier curve, adjust it a little bit, bring that back in a teeny bit more, bring this down a little. Need to bring these over, try to match that flow that's happening in there. Okay, bring this guy a little bit. So now I got to zoom in because I can't see some of the controls and I don't have my glasses on. There, get that point up there, get that one up about right there, get that about there. Make sure the flow is feeling pretty good. So it's starting from here. I think it needs to come over just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to bring these in like so, about there. You're nitpicking it. I mean, I could do this with a brush too, but sometimes I like to do this a little bit more manually because I have a little bit more control over the flow of the highlight. Okay, there. So now I have a dedicated highlight on that edge. And again, I can just come over here. I can use my layer. I can duplicate that. Uh-oh, what did I just do? Oh, I'm going to say duplicate. Why do they put duplicate next to delete? I don't know. So look, I can move that little highlight. Hold on. Duplicate this. There it is. There it is. And I can move that over there a teeny bit more. Or sometimes you could even, I can transform it down here. I can rotate it a little bit more and get it to fit right on that end a little. And if it's a little too bright, right, I could come down, just knock down the opacity very quickly. Okay, so by doing this, what you're going to see that starts to happen is now I can control some of the intensities of my highlights, right? By doing this, I could literally make a gradient flow of highlights across my piece. Now, I could come in and paint it still manually, and there are times when I want to do that, but there's sometimes with a brush where you can only get a certain crispness, but I can alter that crispness now just by hitting Command Paste. Look, I can punch that highlight, throw it right in there, and it's on that edge of the building, and it pops maybe just a little bit more, you know? Actually, I like it sort of right there on that edge, right there. Let's go ahead, let's hit Paste again. Might come back in here and take this guy, let's turn him horizontally, and hit Transform. And since the highlight's in a gradient going from light to dark, it makes it very efficient for me to manipulate it. Let's go to Distort. I can grab this end. I can move it in perspective a little bit to fit the top of that box. See, it goes right on the top there. Come back with my erase, and I'm just going to erase a little bit off the top here, a little bit off the side, and then I'm going to go over it at like a 10% and just fade it in just a teeny bit. Okay? So that's what I'd sort of recommend when you get to that phase once the tone's working really nice. And what's really cool is if I come in here and I start to turn them on and off, do you see them happening in there? And it's just a really nice, precise way to control a couple of those highlights, because it's really easy to get in there when you're painting. You know, like I could come in here and I just get used to painting at the brush a certain size. Like these would be great if that light's coming down here and hitting right up in here. You know, I can get in here and just sort of, let's go to like a 20 or 30, like a 40. Hold on, deselect, 50, 60, I'm at white. Okay, why am I not getting anything? 0, deselect. Oh, that's weird, I keep hitting brush and it's not going, it's stuck on eraser. Okay, there. So I can come in here, paint a little bit of light, and this is great too, it works, but I can only get that brush like so small, right? He has pretty intense light coming down, hitting parts of this. Even on part of the dock, that light's going to come down here and it's going to spread through a little bit. Okay, I have a couple friends in the industry that will, as a technique, they'll just take a gradient and literally throw it down like this, and then they'll map it onto a particular area. So I could do the same thing with shadows into his piece. Let me show you this as an example for everybody, right? So I just painted some highlights on there really quick. Let's say I want to throw in another white gradient somewhere and make it look sort of realistic. Okay, here's another thing that you can do. It's another approach to working, is I can take a dedicated box like that. I could either paint in a gradient or use the gradient tool. For this example, let me just go to brush. Come on, go into brush, and I'm gonna have white right here. What I'm gonna do is go to like a solid white, and then I'm gonna fade it off very lightly down to here like this. Okay, so This is on a separate layer. If I hit deselect right now, you see I just have, oops, it was on a separate layer. Now it's on a separate layer. So, hold on, I screwed up. There, now I have it separate. Sorry about that. Let's go back to brush real quick. There, so I have a nice little gradient right there, right? So I can take this and I can apply it where maybe I need it to. Like, for example, down here on the water. You know, maybe he's having a hard time trying to figure out how that water is going to have a nice little flow or gradient going across it, right? So I could come over here and I can go to distort. I can grab part of this. I can extend it that way. I can grab this end. I can get it to fit right in where I want it to fit. I have a little bit of overhang about right there. Okay, and that's it. I hit enter. Okay, now it's just the process of blending that in there. So to blend that gradient in, it's actually pretty easy. If I go to a brush, let's go to my eraser. Now I tend to use this sort of chalky eraser. The thing I like about it, it has more of a texture feel, and I feel it does a good job blending stuff in. So I can lightly come in here and get a little bit of a gradient, and I'm at what right now, 1%, 10%. And remember, I can hit 0.5 and get a light draw coming off of that, right? So I blended in that front part. Now I could come in here. I'm going to blend in a little bit of this because Jared had light hitting the top of that, right? So now if I blend that in a little bit and I come down here and I get that, now I might need a little bit. I did that on purpose to see if maybe I needed to paint a little bit more in there to get that accentuate out. There's two ways I can do that. One is if I come to the stamp tool. Some of you haven't used the stamp tool. I can press on that area, okay, and it's going to mimic whatever's right there. It'll paint it in about right here. So I can stamp that and paint it in very lightly in there, okay. Problem is hold on, when I stamped, I was at 100%. So when you stamp, make sure you're stamping at like 20 or 30. So now I'm at 20 or 30. See, and I can get a very light sort of gradient of that light source coming across into part of that, okay? The other thing I could do is just come back to my brush, which is still in white, go to 10%, and just try to blend in some of that hard edge. And then once I feel it's getting sort of blended in a little bit more, then I could come back and I can erase a little bit on top of it, and then I could blend this back into the original piece, okay? Just in case you happen to leave that overlap. So what's really cool about this, let me go to like 60% here. Let me get that dock in there. Okay. What's really cool about this type of technique for adding some detail into your environments is it allows you to push the light to a certain point, and if you wanted to, you could even technically come back and start using dodge and burn in there as well, right? You can lighten it and darken it, and you don't really lose anything. Sometimes out of habit, from old school, I just prefer to go in there and manually just knock it down in a couple places. Okay, so that's cool. I sort of, just looking at that, the light starts to feel a lot brighter. At least it does on my screen. I'm not sure how it's looking up there on the monitor. You hollow out a little bit of these boats right there. And if I look at that, I really brightened up part of that area for the light hitting in there. Okay, if I want. And then again, remember I hit paste. Okay, I still have that. I can squash it back down, and I could bring that in, and I could put that along parts of the edge, you know, right up in here, where maybe the part of that light is hitting. Now, one of the things that I hate about Photoshop, Maya doesn't do this. If I go hit transform again, you see how it's put a transform box at X and Y axes, but I have my thing is tilted? That's a pain in the butt. So what you need to do is tilt it horizontal first, then go back to keep it there, then hit transform. Now it'll lock up and be more accurate, and then when I get it to about the size I want, then rotate it, okay, and it stays locked in now. So if I make it smaller, it's going to go back to its original axes, and then I could get like a little highlight in that. In there I can just hit enter, and I can come back and hit erase real quick, take care of some of this overspray right in here, okay. Hold on a minute. See, now I have that nice little highlight on the edge of the dock, right? Okay. It sort of blends itself into part of the piece, okay. So hold on a minute. Let me go back. Let's take a look at what we have. I'm still looking at that, and that's a little too bright. So I'm going to dull it down a little bit more, okay? I start to like that a little bit more, somewhere in the middle there, Maybe just a little bit lighter about there. So it gets the water to pop a little. Okay, so with that, the other part I wanted to show you is the light gradient coming back from the non-lit areas. Okay, so here, let's take these. Let's combine these together. Okay, so what I'm going to do really quick here, I put a layer up on the top. I'm going to come back here, and I have another separate layer. This time, I'm going to do a black gradient. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to switch to my black. I'm going to take my fuzzy brush. Got to have a good fuzzy brush, right? Come on, go to brush. There it is. All right. Sorry, get a little bit of delay from the recorder. So what I'm doing, I'm on a different layer now. I'm putting a very light gradient sort of coming in there. Okay. Let me hit deselect and I'll move it for you. Can you see it there? Okay, very light gradient. Now I could come over. I'm going to select all, copy, put that in the computer's memory. So if I change it, it's still there and I can use it at another time. I'm going to hit Command T right now. Uh-oh. What's going on? Hold on a minute. Deselect. There it goes. Sorry, I get a little bit of a delay. Sometimes you have to select around the gradient because Photoshop won't pick up the whole thing. So look, I'm going to turn that now to a 90. See, Photoshop's only picking up that little area. I don't know why, even though there's more of an area there, right? And so watch, let me transform this. So I can control part of that gradient. Part of that back building might be in shadow, right, Jarek? Because the light's coming from the front. I can make my whole workflow a lot easier. Look, I just drag it down over there. I hit enter. I hit deselect. And then I can come back in here with my eraser. Okay. Here's another little secret on the eraser tool. If you hold shift, it does straight lines when you touch. So if I need to erase, you see that overlap right here, the gradient that he has over that other structure. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's a little lighter on the monitors. Okay, but if I come in here now, if I have my eraser at 100, I touch here, I bring down, I hold shift, and I touch down. I just drew a straight line from one end to the other. And I completely erased. You see that? Then I just come back in the middle and I erase that. So let me show you real quick. It might be a little harder to see right now, but you don't realize that I just came in and put a really nice light little gradient in there, and watch what happens if I darken it. If I come over here and I oops, I was lightening it. If I darken it a little bit more, okay, hold on, let's see if this will work. So it's so light, it's getting a little bit harder to see. Watch it if I duplicate on itself. Okay. Boom. See that? It's a lot richer. It's a little bit too much. But what's cool is I can have very light control over areas that might be very hard for me to get in with a brush by taking a mass selection and either using highlights or applying that type of workflow to it. Okay? Anyway, so that would be my only comment, Jarek. I think you have a really wonderful piece here that's going to turn out really nice. But if you come in here, let's get rid of that layer real quick. And I was using this as sort of an example because now if we come back in here and I take a look at everything we just applied in there, you see how I'm just punching up your highlights a little bit, getting a little bit more contrast in there, and I think you're a done deal. But I would come back as well and I would flatten out a little bit what's on that tree, maybe just get a couple sprinkled highlights on the leaves. Now it feels a little bit more graphic, like some type of funky brush. And by the way, if you wanted to look around, let me see if I have my full brush set here. Hold on a minute. Let me create another layer up on the top. Let's go to brush. Let me make this a little bit smaller. And can't see. Give me a second. I don't know if I have my one at home. I think I do have some of it. Let me see here. I'm looking for water. I have some water brushes that work really cool. If you look around, you could find some. And sometimes you can just take something like this. And this is a great way to do water as well. So I have my water brush now. I'm going to hit X, okay, to flip to white. I'm on another layer. I'm going to hit 100%. I'm going to come in here and just go bam, like that. Okay, so it creates this little ripple pattern. I'm going to transform that. I'm going to turn it this way. I'm going to transform it again. And I'm going to shrink it down. And you see how if I squash that a little bit, it starts to look like a little bit of water reflected in there. That's a great way to put little highlights on there. It's very difficult to paint highlights when they're that small. So I can easily come in here, take part of that now, stretch it down, come back, take my eraser, do a light blend going around it, getting that to fit in there. And now that I have that, I can just copy and paste part of this or duplicate that layer. there it is. It's duplicating the wrong. See, I can move those a little bit up over there. So that's a way I can come in and add even a little bit more water highlights to certain little areas and get them to fade in just a little bit. Okay, see that, just that little bit there? Get a little bit here, a little there. It sort of makes the water pop out a little bit. I'm putting finished surface detail on the top as an overlying texture, but I'm doing that technique of sort of minimizing, right? It helps me out quite a bit, okay? So if I take a look at all of that, you know, they're just punching up a couple of shadows, a couple little highlights, and my eye is really staying focused in this particular area, okay? That'd be my only comment. Excellent work, Jarek. It's a really nice piece, okay? It's fantastic. All right, let's go here. Next piece. All right. So, Eden. Pros and cons. So that's the piece you picked, right? It might be, is it darker on my monitor? It might be a little darker on my monitor. You need to punch up that light a little bit more. Okay? This is what I mean by that. If I come in here, let's go back here. Let me take a soft brush. That value right now, I can tell by looking at it, is like a 20 or 30. Where's Eden at?
Right here.
There he is. Hey, hi, Eden.
Intentionally punch everything down a little bit.
That's okay. No worries, because now the fun part is controlling it like I just did on multiple layers with white highlights. And then you allow the white to breathe. Remember, light spreads. It goes from intensity and then it dulls off. In light, you can do this. I used to do this in the environment tone class, right? Excuse me, the digital painting class where we focus on tone. If you take a candle in your bedroom and there's no other lights on and you have a very light candle, it's a very low intensity light source, that light breathes all the way across the room and will still hit objects and turn the form, right? So you get to do that to part of this. Right now, your highlights right here, your brightest highlight is like at a 50. That's excellent. That means you have everything from here to here. You have from 0 all the way down to about 45% to add in there, which is really cool. So you're going to be able to get in here and you're going to be able to really punch some of this up. You're going to be able to get a nice, soft type of flow of light coming in here. Hold on, why am I not getting anything? Is that because I'm an eraser again. Okay, let's try that. I keep hitting brush, and I think it's the recorder that lags a little bit when I'm working here. Sorry about that. So anyway, there we go. All right, so you're going to be able to get this really nice spread. You're going to be able to come in here, punch up some of that light, and really allow some of that light to come and get through here, come down through parts of here. You're going to have a little bit more of some light coming up and bouncing off some of these walls, getting up in here. You're treating this very nicely. It's looking very fantastically put together, and you're getting these really nice visual reads. And once you get in here and just punch a couple more of these lights and get a little bit more of that light spreading across the town, and technically even with that light coming up now, you might even have some of it hitting under your clouds. Top of your clouds might become a little bit darker, and you might get a little bit more highlights up above. So let me switch to, I like this brush. A little bit easier to get some. And I apologize if it looks, does it look okay up there? Because sometimes I notice the marks I'm doing here on the monitor, they lighten up, and they're a little hard to see.
I can see it.
Can you see it? Okay. But when you guys watch the demo, you'll be able to see it a little bit more, a little easier, because you'll be able to see the variation. Especially here, you have light. It's going to come up. So I'm at like a 20%, 10% grade right now. So I'm painting very lightly, and I'm going to go back between like 10, 20, and 30. I'm getting little highlights in here, like maybe underneath there. Might be pretty bright. Might get pretty bright up there. Might have a little brighter there. And part of that front, part of that edge in here. I'm going to get some like little areas and pop some of this. Okay, a little bit more. Because all that light's sort of coming from there, right? And then I'm going to jump back down to like 10%. Try to get that pathway to light up a little bit more. So everything's going from dark to lighter, right? I like how you have that little shadow casting up here. So what you could do, you could sit here and render this like I'm doing, or you could do that gradient I just did on another layer. You could literally put it on top and erase around it, and it's done pristinely for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So watch, let me see if I can do some of that really quick on another layer here. So I'm going to take a new layer here, marquee. That's the center of town, right? That's where his light is the brightest. Got to have a nice fuzzy brush. I love this fuzzy brush right here. It's very soft. So we're going to get light that punches up here. I'm going to sort of come up here, get a little bit brighter here, and then I'm going to fade this off. Nice light coming back there. Punch it back down a little bit more. Okay. So you can see I have this little gradient here. I can almost literally come up and literally throw it down like right there in part of it. Let me just stretch it out a little bit more into about here. And then I'm going to come in here with my eraser. And I like that guy. And erase, go to about 30% here. Erase from behind that building. It's a little bit easier a workflow to do it this way because you have a little bit more control. It's hard to get the gradients to paint in there completely smooth. There's another option too. We have some smudge tools that we can use, right? So you can paint it in there and then you can come back and smudge, but what takes me 20 minutes to do that, I can do pretty fast here just by using a gradient, right? I'm going to come in here, take my gradient at about 10%, going to round some of these bushes here, blend it in, get rid of that hard edge. It's right in there. That's on the back of a house. I'm going to go up to about 60, erase along part of this in here, get that to fade back down, drop down to about a 30 as I try to blend into that edge. Right there, get rid of those lines. On the top here, I have that line that's going across. I'm going to take my eraser, go back down to 10%. Just sort of lightly bringing my hand across, trying to blend that in. Okay, so I can see, get rid of that line. That line should be gone, right? That's also going to accentuate your gradient that you have in the sky, right? A little bit larger here, a couple of passes like that. And there's that glow that's right in there that's sort of happening. You see it a little bit? Yeah. And part of me wanted to dull that down a little bit, but then part of me sort of likes it, like glowing up like that, you know? And then another thing you could do is after you have that in there, right? I don't mind that glow at all. Light sometimes travels and hits like little sprinkles. Does that make sense? So let me go back to one of my brushes. I have a couple brushes at home on my main computer that does snow. Here's, I think, one of them that's very similar. Okay, and what's cool about this, what you want to do is just on another layer, right? So what I find to get little sprinkles or little light reflections, it's very hard to do them small sometimes. Sometimes it's easier to do them full size. So if I hit right now, I think you already had some in there, right?
I just had stars.
Oh, that's what. Look, you're looking for. I just look at this brush. I'm like, you're looking through a pane glass of snowy window, right? No. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit it. Try if I can drag this along and get a little bit of a. Let me see what happens if I transform that down and make it smaller. And if I get like a little bit of that sparkle feel, sort of up above. Let me duplicate the layer on top of itself so it brightens itself a little bit more. Let me combine those. And then let me see if I can stretch it out a little. A little bit of like, now it's not working quite the way I want it to. It's looking like a dirty window, but dull it down a little bit. Just trying to see if I get a little bit of that haze, like, you know what I mean? Like little sparkles, but I'm sort of not liking the look of it now. But anyway, just if I take this, that was my only thing, is that you punch up your values in there and look at the difference. You really get that center of focus to pop in there, you know? I would even consider, in terms of adding a darker value as well, if I come back in here, try this guy here. Too bright. Too dark, I meant. I want to see if I can punch him down because he's especially this backside's out of it, right? Brings him more into the foreground of what you have over here. And these are farther away. Just put a little bit more value in there. Not too much. Let me see. Let me drop that down just a teeny bit. Like that. That's not bad. Okay. So really minor adjustments. I think it'll be a lot of fun when you add those in there. I mean, that's the difference of what I did. I just brightened it up a little bit more. And I'm still thinking now, after looking at it secondary, I might come in here with my eraser at like 0.5 and just hit it a couple times and knock down that light just a teeny bit more. But I sort of like that uplight, that Frankenstein lighting coming up. Part of that, it gives it a lot of character to it. I think you could definitely get in here. Let me just do this really quick, and you're going to have some of that uplighting coming up under very softly, under part of these clouds, right? You're going to have that. So you could sort of come in here. Because if that's the main light source in that part of town, right? And if I hit hide really quick, brush, and if we flip to, oops, put a group in there somehow. So if I come in here with my brush, we're going to go down like 0.3, very light. And by hiding the ants, Control H, I can see myself brushing part of that light, sort of reflecting on there, hitting underneath of those clouds. You see that? And then it's on another layer, right? If I do too much, like I did right there, I just drop down to erase. Oops. I can drop down to erase like 20%. And I can go around some of this and just fade in that light a little bit around that cloud or make it a lot softer. But then I'd make the top of the cloud a little bit darker because that's the light source is coming from underneath. Okay?
Yeah, I started with moonlight. I don't know how much of that would show on the top before I added in the town light.
Just trying to punch that up a little. What's going on now? Why am I not getting any 0? There it is. Yeah, anyway, I think it's a good piece. It's looking very nice. There's a lot of mood developing in it. Okay?
What about the bottom one? Like I was experimenting with that. I don't know how well it works.
With that one?
Yeah.
Let me zoom in. I think it's looking pretty good. It's a little blown out in terms of the highlight that's here is also hitting way over here. It's just as bright. To me, that would be the most intense point. And then, are you going for snow in this?
No.
Because if you're not going for snow, right now those rooftops look like they're snow. Because they're almost as bright white. So I would dull down quite a bit and get those to come back together. The other thing is that when you hand paint in a star like that, all your beams are equal right now, right? And sometimes it looks a little too overwhelming. If you look around, you'll find one of these bad boys. Okay. Find one of these guys. It's instant star. So if I shrink that down, there's a couple brushes you can find like this. And then you can delineate from that, knock it down. There's a couple others that are just, that work a little bit. Or what you do, what I would do if I was painting it by hand, I would paint a couple of the rays separate at different sizes and then go back and rotate them in there and make it, you know what I mean?
I was trying to go for like where when the sun gets like bright in your face and everything is really dark and really bright. And it's like shadows are really dark.
Where it's like that and it's, no.
Yeah.
It's like an alien individual.
Yeah.
No. Sure. No, I see what you're saying.
So how dark is the room speed?
Well, remember there's a local value to the objects. So if a roof tile is like a brown and it's a little bit lighter, then, you know, I mean, if it's a brown and that translates like a 4 or 5, then a highlight on there might only be like a 3. Right now, you're getting, you know, or it might be more like a 4 or 5 if it's a dark tile.
Yeah.
So that's the hard thing about tone is you got to remember what are the local values of every object that you see, okay? Yeah, it's good work though. They're good studies. I think that'll be a fun study. It has a nice, soft, children's book feel. But the other thing I wanted to point out really quick while I'm looking at it is also, I'm going to do this with a pointer. If light's coming from here and it's radiating upward, you're going to have some faces on those mountains that might catch more light than those mountains are back there. Right now, these mountains are about equal to what's right here, right? So, you know, just something to think about as you punch some of this up and get that reed to go very lightly across the way, okay? Has a nice, like, Chris Van Allsburg type of soft children's book feel, illustration feel to it. Okay, it's nice work. All right, good job. All right, there's Jerix. We already did Jerix. And she's not here yet, so we'll cover that towards the end. And Everett, where's Everett at? Let's talk a little later. Looks like you're struggling on the light and pushing and pulling. And the thing to do in case you're getting, here's the secret, guys. I think I mentioned this to you before. You start with a midtone on the piece. And then you decide light's coming from one side and you paint in the light. That's it. If you start with white, you can't succeed. It's too complicated because you can't paint white into white. You start with a brown layer, or excuse me, a tone layer on top. You know, like here, you have a tone layer that's nighttime, but here it's not night. Now it's turned to morning. So you paint it all one value. And then you come over and start to pull out light source, and then you start to push darks at the same time. And then you get into that stage of rendering, okay? That'll help you out a little bit more. So let's talk in a couple minutes here. All right? Whose is this? Okay, D. All right. It's looking pretty good, D. The only comment I would make is, in terms of perspective, that light might be a teeny bit off that's coming. Look, it's here. That light's going to cast if it's coming through, meaning there's some type of item above it that's casting the light. Let me draw this in red for you. Okay. Switch my drawing brush here. And so if you draw this box shape and look inside it, there's a light like here casting that light, right? So if that light's going to cast there, if we draw a dotted line down here and come across in perspective like this, right? That means your highlight's going to be hitting about here, like that. Does that make sense? You have your highlight coming forward as if the light was way here in the corner, sort of pushing out this way. And then it's putting the highlight way down there. I don't know, to me that could be a really tough call on that. To me, just to play it safe, usually lights are lit, usually lights and tend to be like in the middle of a room or hanging. And even if it was in a corner, it's still going to highlight. You're still going to have an area up here that's going to be lit up. You know what I mean? With light coming down. In fact, this is, by the way, judged as always. A couple people mention this. A couple artists I know say it's cheating to use light rays. Light rays are cheating, and I sort of disagree with that a little bit because light transitions, and the only time you see, there are certain times when you see light rays. Does anybody know when that is? You tend to see light rays at night because you can see the beam of light transferring, and you tend to see light rays in dusty locations where you have dust, like in a forest, where there's like little dust and particles, okay, flying around. And then you tend to see light rays in certain evening time shots when you have bugs or other little small elements that could be getting into the light and the sun's coming across, because there's such a high transition in the color spectrum going from like yellow to orange to red. When you see the light stretching, you tend to see what looks like a little bit of a ray. Okay, so what you could do if you wanted to, but I would do it very sparingly, is you could literally come in here with like a soft brush and you could give that feel that a little bit of white might be resonating from here just by taking a brush and sort of punching it up a teeny bit more like that. It looks like the light's on, right? And then if you come down here, if that light's on like that, maybe there's a little bit of a lit path that's coming down where you can see that light sort of coming down and hitting part of the waterfront right now, right? So the next problem is, the next concern of mine is, what is that light? And I did it a little bit too intense there. I would just dull that down a little bit like that. Okay. The next concern I have is, what is that down below? Is that water or is that ground? Is it ground? Okay. If it's dirt, what I would recommend to you to do, sir, is to come in and draw like some form of environment surface. So like maybe this is some rock and cobblestone. Maybe this right here is like a pathway. This might be part dirt, and then there's cobblestone like here that transfers, because now your cobblestones are going to get hit and you're going to have highlights on top of your cobblestones. Do you see that? And the closer your cobblestones are to the center mass here, the brighter the highlights are going to be, and as they fade, it'll get a little bit duller. Okay, but if your light's coming from here and it's hitting here, I'm not getting too bright right now. you have a brighter highlight right here, and then this is a little bit brighter further out. What about all this area in between here? That's going to have light coming across it as well. You're also going to have a difference in the light coming up. Light's going to come down from here. It's going to hit right in here. Then the light's going to bounce, right? So when the light bounces, you're going to have highlights up in here, up in there. You're going to have some highlights up in here, right? They're going to really become a little bit pronounced. Right now, you're not developing that in your work. Right now, that value is very similar to that value, and it wouldn't be so, especially if that light is hitting here, bouncing from the ground and coming off there. I would make some of those adjustments, okay? All right. The other thing I think about too, I see that you have a light on here and a light here. If that light's on, again, you got to remember that's coming out at an angle like this. It's going to hit about right there, okay? And then it might fade off, and then that means this is going to be dark right in here. That's going to be all a much darker value because that is away from the light source. So as you look at part of this over here, you're going to have gradients happening. There's no gradients right now. You're going to have dark coming into light, dark fading up here like this, hitting part of this, right? You need to get those gradients in there to get part of that to work. There's no gradient. Should have a little bit more gradient coming over here on the side, you know. And then if that light is now, coming in through here, maybe it's coming through here, comes down there, it spreads a little bit. We might have a little bit of highlight hitting some of these little ends up in here where you see a little bit of a transition between that plane. The light might be bouncing, might be a little bit light there. You know, I just would work on some of that a little bit more and get the light to feel like it's bouncing, coming through, especially the ground. That ground right now I thought was like a loose water of some kind. I'd have some type of stones or path or element there that allow the light to reflect a little bit more so you can tell the difference between a placed stone and a ground plane. Okay, the ground or dirt might be a little bit darker, the stone's a little bit more reflective. Outside of this one, I mean, I actually find this one to be a little interesting too, where you have light coming down, that building's in shadow, and light's coming in here, it's bouncing, but again, you need to get a little bit more bright light on this piece here. I think that's not too bad of a study. You just need to make sure the perspective is working in there and it's coming together. I think on this study, you might actually have a little bit more highlights coming through. If light's coming down, you might have a little bit of highlight hitting in here, and some of that highlight might be going across the water a little bit, separating that out just a little bit more, right? And again, if light's coming in here and bouncing, you know, there's no gradients in the shadows, you know. You need to have, shadows aren't going to be the same value all the way across. So you're going to have some forms of light gradients taking place where the edge might be a little bit darker and then it fades off into here. That building's a little bit darker on the side and you're going to have gradients that fade back into here. This top right here might be a little bit darker and then it lightly fades down into part of that, right? That side of the building could be a little bit darker and it starts to get things maybe a little bit more pronounced than what it is right now. Okay, D? All right, it's actually not bad. The way I went a little too dark with my values on there. Well, I'm painting over the line, that's the problem. So if I darken them down just a little bit by about 20%, sort of like that, but it's up to you which one you want to do. If you do this, you got to have one main area of focus. Right now, I'm sort of not getting that area of focus. I'd focus on the light hitting here, maybe bouncing off in there and, you know, working accordingly. Or here's another idea. If light's coming this way, what if this door is open and you have a couple boats here? Now you've picked a focal point. Now we have a dedicated focal point because I look at this and then it looks like, hey, there's a door here that's open, there's boats here, and it looks like a bar. Maybe there's a sign here hanging off, you know, and it looks like a pub, and now you have people coming up in their little boats or whatever, and they're coming to drink. But again, this still has a soft feel. To me, this feels like water than it does dirt, you know. But now you create more focal point there. So maybe it's not boats, maybe it is dirt, then you have some stone that might lead the way there. Maybe that door is open, we see light casting out here. Now we need a focal point. Right now in your piece, we're not getting a focal point. You're taking me here and you're taking me here. And nothing's happening here in the middle. But your composition's saying, hey, look here, look here, look here, look here. And your highlight says look here, but there's nothing there. Right? So I might consider adjusting part of that. Okay? Thank you, D. All right. All right, let's come back to Jessica's a little bit later. All right, Dan. See what we have here. They're all good studies. They all look nice. Your daytime looks great. What I was just mentioning before about the gradients, Dan, that's something you're going to have to get into here, because I'll just draw on top of it. As your light is coming in this angle, right, and you're getting lights in here, you're going to be a good candidate to have some nice gradients back up in here, to have some gradients coming in from parts of the tree. You're going to have some gradients coming from here, going down a little bit more, right? So, oops, you're going to have quite a few areas in there. They're going to be great for some little gradients to punch it up a little. That's my only real comment on that. And then separate out your if you have cloud. I don't know if you wanted this whimsical thing you have in the back here. It's okay. But if you put that white, then it's going to flatten out with your highlights. So maybe just throw a couple clouds in the back, just one or two. Maybe just come back here and you have like a little cloud here. Just a little guy like that, just create some more depth beside it, okay? But without a doubt, oops, sorry, keep drawing on the wrong. But without a doubt, the little gradients and the little bits of dark to light, that'll be a little bit darker, and then it fades down, then it might be a little bit darker between that bush and there, and then it might grade it up a little bit, right? Couple of those little darker values on there, and it'll really start to work a lot easier. Now watch, if I quickly just go in with a little bit of black, and I come into that fuzzy brush, I'm just going to do that like super fast. I'm going to come in here, darken that, punch up your bush a little bit more in the foreground here, come over here, hit top of that, and then maybe underneath that, the overhang there's a little bit of a gradient that comes down this way. You might have a little bit more into there, a little bit more there. You have a shadow line coming from here, right? Just putting a teeny bit more on there. I didn't put it, oops, I painted on the wrong layer, my bad. Wasn't focusing on the layers, but you see that difference? Let me Command Z it and I'll try to see if I can undo it all. I just take some of those darks away. I think that's all you got to do is put a little bit more gradients in there. You're good to go. Okay, it's good work, Dan. All right, nice first piece. All right. Next, Beverly. She isn't here. I might as well cover these really quick. I like, so Beverly, if you see this, and I'll cover Jessica's as well. I like this quite a bit. I think it's working well. My only comment is I think you've got the tone very finessed into a really good point where you can start ditching part of the line. So my recommendation on this would be to go to the line drawing, drop the line, and I can't do that on this because I just have a sealed file that's only on one layer. I think you can get in here and you can start eliminating some of the line and getting the values to read, especially when you get back in there. Other than that, it looks great. I might put a little bit more indication of water. That doesn't quite, when I look at that ground, does anyone else look at that ground and sense that as almost dirt or sand? Right? It's very close to feeling like dirt or sand, and part of that reason is because water has highlights on them. So if you're, what that means, what you need to do in here, if you're going to paint over that, is you basically have to come in here like this and paint this ground. Water is dark, okay, folks? It doesn't reflect well. Or, excuse me. It reflects well, but it picks up the darker value from what's underneath. So the secret to water is you come in and you get a nice gradient like this under it. And then you come back on top of that dark value, and then you paint the little highlights sprinkling across the top of the water. Okay? Once water goes below like 3 or 5 feet, it tends to be a little bit darker. You get a dark reflection coming up, especially when the light source in this particular piece is coming from back here. The light source is way back here, and it's coming in this way, right? It's coming in sort of this way, spreading across. So you're going to have then highlights hitting this little area, sprinkling through, dissipating up, and then as they, oops, gosh darn it, I'm on the same layer again. And then as they start to do that and they start to sprinkle up, then you can come in here and then you can create some of these little differences in water as it gradates out and creates into waves and spreads apart, and you'll get those little highlights that start to diminish across. So that would be my comment here. Something else you can do really quick too with this is if you put a layer up on the top there, sometimes you can just take these little lines very skinny. Now that we have that darker, I'm going to hide those lines. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to switch to a nice white and go back to my brush here. Go to about 40%. I'm going to come in here and so you can almost see it happen. Watch the highlight speckle across. So I come in here with my brush. You see it happening? See, now it feels a little bit more like water because you get those highlights that speckle across part of the surface. See that? And then if you hit deselect, then you come in here with one or two. Actually, I shouldn't have hit deselect. What I want to do is, let me see, hide. Now I got to deselect V. There, hide. Oops. I wanted to try to punch those up a little bit more. Some of those highlights. Oh, I lost the selection. My bad. So let me try this. Let's try drawing a line around it. Hit V. And now select it. Now they're too light to get in there. So what I might do is duplicate the layer on top of itself. Get a couple of those highlights to pronounce out a little bit. Okay, and then some back here could still be even smaller than what's there. And then you can come in here now with a brush and get some of these to have a little bit of a nice gradient flow where it's hitting and it's sort of glimmering across part of the water here. And you get part of that light reflecting off the top a little. That'll make it feel a little bit more like water. And you can also squash them down a little bit like this. See? And offset the highlights on top of each other and see how that feels. Like it's a little bit of a light blur type of feel. Here, watch. Here, like that. See, I just squashed up the highlights a little bit more. That feels a little bit more like water to me, having that on top of that. So all I had to do, again, was darken the surface, add some more, value to that water, and then come in and pepper in some of those highlights up on top of it, okay? And then loosen the line, and I think you'll be good to go. Or thin down the line a little bit more so the values are reading underneath, okay? Watch that. That right there, okay? That's super bright right here. I tone that down just a little bit, okay? Good job, Beverly. All right, and let's go in here. Let's talk about Jessica's, okay? These are beautiful studies, Jessica. They're all very nice. So I think they all look really cool. I really like this one with, so I like this one too. Man, they're all fun. Okay. So one of the things that I'm feeling about when I sense this is I want that spread of light. I want to feel light coming down and getting, this still has sort of like a graphic approach to me. And when I'm talking about the spread of light, I'm talking about gradients. I need to see light hitting surfaces and textures gradating from a little bit brighter to a little bit duller. Okay, same thing with some of the shadows. Look, you have all this light coming in here, especially coming from back in here. You should be able to get in here in parts of the back, and you should have some light hitting, and it should be dulling out. Let me see if I can just hit this really quick. Like, for example, you have this character here. I know you're staging part of your light around this character. Huh? I am, huh? Thank you. See, it's really hard. I don't mean to do that. I try to paint on a separate layer. There. But I'm too busy. I get caught up in trying to do the demo. I'm going to come in here, punch this, hit a couple little areas here, get some of that light to pop back, fade back here. If light's coming right sort of behind this guy, it might be hitting some real direct highlights, then goes across parts of that bush. Okay. And then if the light's coming in here, I'm going to really try to punch some of this up. And then as that light hits right in here, then I want to see just that light spread going across part of this. So that's where I just drop my brush to like 10 or 20 and just start coming in and painting in just really lightly some of these, the light spreading in there, okay? Something else you can do that ends up working a little bit more is you can use that technique where I just took the lasso tool, right? And I take the lasso tool and I draw on the side of those little selections. Now I'm just hitting shift, trying to punch up a couple of these lights and getting a little bit more light to spread across and feel like highlights are hitting little areas in my drawing here. And then once I get that feel of there, I can almost just come in really lightly with a brush and just sort of, I want that light to feel like it's spreading into my characters a little bit, you know? Coming along part of that surface wall right here. Being a little bit brighter. And then getting a little bit duller. Hitting this edge. Look, I should be able to have light just tapping on that edge right there. A little highlight. And that light just sort of just lightly fades out. And here it's a little bit lighter. Fading out. Light does that. It spreads like that. And if you want to get really good at painting and understanding part of that flow, you have to get those little bits of value and those gradient controls in there. So again, we're back to that magic word, is what is the gradient? How is the flow of light affecting, you know? Get a little highlight here, punch that little bit of that roof up there and let that gradient come in here. Heck, I'm almost tempted to come in here with my light, just very lightly with a brush. Oops, that might be a little dark. That haze is, maybe there's a little bit of light coming in behind part of that character, and then where I did that, I come in with my eraser at 100%, and then I'm going to erase the overlay of the character, because see what happens is that light hits my character, and I just want it to hit the side of the character. I want the character to retain its value. Okay? And now with that light coming in like that, it allows me to do something else, which is pretty cool, right? It allows me to use that light to my advantage. I could take the shape in here of this character, and I can use that character in a little bit of a shadow to really get that character to pop out a little bit more. So I can copy that and paste that. Okay, so there's my little character guy there. What I'm going to do is going to go to levels. I'm going to punch him up, get him pretty dark so I can see him. I'm going to come over here, put him on top, hit transform. I'm going to go to distort. I'm going to grab this and bring it down. You see how I brought that shadow down like that? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to spread out the back end like this of that shadow that's coming in like so. Hit enter. And now that I have that in there, I'm going to darken down. Actually, I almost want to keep it like that. About there at about 85% or so. And then I'm going to hit erase and go in with like a 10% and then lightly sort of come across here and fade part of that shadow back in. You see that? So now by doing that, all I'm trying to do is add a little bit more gradient control, punch up the focus onto that character that they're coming into. And look, I just added a little bit more feel, a little bit more sensibilities of light hitting with a little bit more gradient control in this area. And I feel that's going to work a little bit easier. And then remember, if that light's coming in here, you're still subject to having some nice little highlights, Jessica, up on, just very soft and subtle, nothing too hardcore. Okay. Let's try it about. Trying to get a couple little slide indications of lights going across part of them, maybe hitting up here. Maybe a speckled tour of light hitting a part of that plant or something. And then you have, look, you have all these wonderful little stones here. It'd be great to come in here. You can do that technique I was doing on Jerix, where I'm just copying and pasting a couple little different highlights so they don't all look the same, right?
Is there a reason why you copy the character and stretch it as opposed to just the shape of it?
I put copy and pasted it, turn it into the shadow.
But why wouldn't you just take the shape of it and then paint over that, distort it, as opposed to...
Because it takes me longer than just copying the character, darkening it, throwing it down.
You have the highlights on the character too, on the shadow.
Yeah, but what I did is by darkening it, when I went into levels real quick, I don't know if you saw that. Look,
Yeah,
when
I
I
saw you do that.
when I pasted the character like this, it's still in the computer's memory, right? By going into levels, I went like this, and I darkened it, and I killed most of the highlights that would be in there. So then when I take that down and distort it, now I know I'm going to erase part of it, and from that angle like that, I know you're not really going to see. You're right, you see a little bit in there, but once I come in here, and then once I fade that off, in terms of opacity, see, it almost dissipates. And if anything, it's going to work in my hand, or in my favor, where it looks like there's maybe a little bit of a highlight or something coming down there with the light coming from behind part of the character. It's just something quick. You're right. I'm working really fast because we're doing demos in class, and I'm trying not to go too long critiquing everybody's stuff. But if I was doing that at home, I would have done it a little bit more precisely. But sometimes you just, you do things to save time because it's quick and efficient in Photoshop. Okay. Anyway, and back to that. Let me delete that layer. I still like if this light, we have that soft sort of feel in here, right, of light coming in through parts of here. You're going to have this get a little bit lighter. You're going to sense some of that light coming up in here as well. Okay, there it goes. What's happening is I hit brush, and then it's not changing, and I think part of that's because I have a little bit of a delay from the recorder coming on right now. Trying to punch up a couple little areas just to accentuate that light, maybe coming in a little bit more. To me, there should be a real nice little crisp highlight. Oh. Close to that building, sort of locking us all. I want to keep the eye right now. What's my goal with my little highlights on Jessica's piece here? I want to keep the eye right here. Boom. That's my target area. So if I can put a little teeny bitty highlight on the edge of that roof right there, okay, all that's going to do is going to point me back down in this direction and keep me from leaving. If I come down here, this is a composition game. If I come back down here and I put one little highlight on the top of the brick right there, and maybe a little one there, and a little one there, and then I fade them off and put one behind the character, that's a road that's going to lead me back to the character. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's these little cheats. I have, a little bit of a highlight here on that edge. Okay, I might have one or two sprinkled in on the top of the tree right there, like so. See that? All that's doing, basically, what my goal is this. A clump, a cluster, that points me to look here. That points me back to the character, and that's one of the big visual reads. You see that? That's my goal, and that's what I would tell Jessica to do as well. So it's a beautiful piece, but I still feel like we could get some nice little gradients in there. And then look at the, to me, what do you guys think? Is there a difference from going to there, and then you come into here and you get a little bit more of that light? And the only thing I'm being a little critical on myself is I don't like some of that haze. It's a little bright, so I might come in here really light with my eraser and just sort of dull that haze, that light coming in there. Now it's a lot dimmer. See that? It's not nearly as bright, but I still get that feel of boom, light's coming down, it's hitting this character, and then I would just get a couple more of the gradients really, going in here. Look, you have light coming in here that's going to be pretty bright. You're going to have a nice little fade across part of that. You might have part of the base here having a little bit of a highlight, and then that light sort of comes across here. You have this little edge guy here. All right, you can use that stuff to your advantage where, we get this feel, the light's just coming down and hitting this whole side and almost on the side of the character as well, like this, and then just sort of fading back a little bit. Okay, I like that. To me, I get that nice feel, and also by putting in a little bit of that haze, I'm getting a little bit of spread. See, light's bouncing and it's coming back up in part of here a little bit. So now if I come in here really light, I might have a little bit of a reflective highlight coming up in here and in here. Have a little bit of a reflective highlight coming back in here. I was pretty jazzed when I did my tonal studies in studios. I always got really positive comments from art directors and directors that there's a real good sense and a real good feel of the light transitioning, and it created a lot of mood. And it's not, I'm just thinking, remember I told you guys, I think of these little percentages, all these little things that add up. 1% here, 3% there, another 2% there, and those add up to what? To 15 or 20% parts of the piece getting a little bit, a little bit better. Trying to skip every other stone and lighten it a little bit more. So, do you guys sense that a little bit between here and the cobblestone? I really get this sort of nice feel of light coming in through parts of here. It's very lightly, just addressing a couple little things. These very subtle details that make a difference digitally. Okay? All right, I know I have to go to another piece, but I'm having fun working on Jessica's piece. So look at the difference. Ready? My favorite thing. Off and on. Look at the cobblestones just light up. Look at the character light up. Part of that light, it's reflecting up here into all of this. That's really important. It's getting that structure to visually read, right? These little details are making it sort of come alive and getting us, and again, I'm peppering in details in a little bit of a circle to bring us back to that character who is a dedicated focal point, okay? All right, good work, Jessica. All right, next, let's come over here and so Colin, so a little bit better in terms of the light, but if the light's coming from the windows here, that light's going to be coming down eventually. It's going to be hitting part of the ground plane right here. Do you see that? So if I have light coming through here, it's going to hit this ground plane. You're going to have little pockets of your ground plane that are going to be lit up accordingly. Okay? So the problem is you have lights on all over the whole entire piece. So it's like there's no real focal point. We need to have one dedicated focal point. So if that window's on here, right, you're going to come down, you're going to see a little bit of reflective light of that from that window down there. Do you see that? Yeah. So you're going to have some of that light coming down to the ground. The other thing too is, I don't know if it's my monitor, but if I come up here, if that's a nighttime scene, you should be a little bit richer. Okay. So what I mean by that, not richer in terms of money, but in terms of your value. So I'm going to select that. Let me zoom in real quick. So you should be a little bit darker. It's nighttime, right? Should be a little bit more like that. Yeah, because if you get overcast, then you're not going to be able to see the lights coming in on the window.
It's like dark, but also like over the side.
So maybe it's like really dark, ominous sky type of thing. Again, the reason why I need more contrast in this is I need the light to read. You'd be better off having a visual read come from only one key area. Like for example, if that door was open, right? That's a little too bright, but that'll do for now. And if I have that light that's on there, then it would make sense that light's going to cast out from here. It's going to hit part of these stones. Part of that light's going to cast out here. It's going to cast across part of the road. It's going to get lighter as it's going. These windows might be a little bit brighter, right? You might have a little bit of a soft haze. Oops, wrong size. Coming off parts of the window. Even a little bit of this coming out from the door, right? That starts to give me the feel that there's light on. And then I would dull down some of the other lights and just focus, maybe this is on here, and you have that part of town, and then maybe just this off. But having all the other lights on, it becomes really busy and, starts to kill the piece a little bit. The other thing too, Colin, that's going to happen is your roof tiles, right? Your roof tiles are going to be a darker value. Their roof tiles tend to be a little bit dark, like some form of a slate. Okay, so you're going to be able to get into your piece here, and you should be able to darken up these roof tiles. Right now they're all sort of feeling like they're one core value. Watch, if I just hit this a little bit, try to darken that roof, punch that roof a little bit more. There's going to be a gradient going from the top down to here because the light's on, right? So if I come back here and I darken that roof up, right now your roof's the same value as the building, and that's going to throw it off a little bit. So if your roofs always tend to be a little bit darker, so just by doing the roofs, it starts to make the piece pop a little bit more. Do you see that? Okay. And then that roof is behind here, so that's like a little alleyway. It's going to be darker back in there. See that? It's going to be a little bit darker up in there. And then your sky is going to be a little bit darker here, and then it's going to fade down because it's nighttime. Okay? Then you could come in, adjust that a little bit lighter like that. That's why I always work in layers and I merge them. Sometimes I tend to paint a little darker. Sometimes I tend to overdo my highlights, so that way I can adjust them and finesse them in. But look, if you came in like this, And if I go back here, and if you started thinking of, hey, you know, oops, you have lights on. This guy's door is lit up. You can see a little bit inside, and then we have light maybe coming in from here. Part of that light is spreading out into the street. And if you have like cobblestones in here, you know, now you start to create a little bit more of a focal point, right? So if I take those right now and I hide part of those, and I'm going to come back here with my brush, soft fuzzy, and if I'm imagining I am getting little highlights coming on some of these little cobblestones here, and some are coming up through here with light hitting some of them, getting darker, as they fade off they get much lighter. See that? It starts to give me a little bit more information as what's happening in terms of the overall texture on part of the ground plane, you know? Okay, all those things come together and it helps unite part of your composition together. Okay? All right, thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Munn. Good study. They're all a lot of fun. I also like this one quite a bit. The second one here. What do you think? Any preference? No comment? You got to say something. All right, so I like this. The reason why is part of that contrast in there. I think if you get in here and you punch up, right now I can tell by looking that your highlight right here is like at a 6, 5, or see that right here? It's right there. You're at 4 or 5. So here you got a little bit brighter. You jumped up a notch to about a 4. So you're in a good position to come in here and really just throw down some highlights. Just put a layer on the top. Come over here. Don't go quite with a pure bright white, but just get in here and just start what I was doing with the gradients, you know. You can get some really cool gradients happening in here where you're hitting that edge of that tarp, and then we get a light gradient that comes across part of that, and then you get that nice little bright highlight hitting up in there. Hits down here, it's going to hit part of your cobblestones down below, right? Might have some highlights there like you did on the sign. Down here you might brighten up the road a little bit. You might punch up part of that little edge in there, a little bit more of a gradient. Heck, you might even have, if you wanted to, you can put another layer above and just sort of do this line going, oops, like about there. Transform that. You might have some little highlights hitting the tops of your stairs from a little bit of an angle. Do you see that? Oops. If I bring that down and put that as like a little highlight right here on another layer, erase that little tip there. You might have a couple going up there, right? Oops. I meant to erase, copy and paste, select all, copy, paste. So you might have another little highlight over there, another little guy sort of like in the middle. And if I duplicate those I just did right there, and if I move a couple of those up to the top a little bit more, and if I make those a little bit brighter because they're closer to the light source, right? Light reflects and bounce a little bit, so you know these I can dull down a teeny bit more, and then these up here I can duplicate that other layer on top of it and lower itself like that. So now that becomes the brighter pair because it's closer to the top of the, see that? So I'm just getting the tops of the stairs, getting little highlights on them, lights bouncing around and so on. It's going to hit and separate the difference between the tops and the bottoms, right? Little things like that. Props down here. Man, you can get some really cool highlights in dark areas. You have some shadows area, different areas in here for shadows. Okay, give me a second. Deselect. Let me come in here. Okay, what's going on? Go back to brush. Come on, there it goes. There. So you can have some little dark. This is all in shadow, right? Technically, this overhang, this is going to be in shadow as well, because it's the back side of that. You can have These little guys might be a little bit darker value. Part of this is going to be a little darker. That's a little darker. And then you come in here, you do the same thing in here, and then you start punching some of those highlights, hitting these little boxes, these little elements, right? And you start to get a lot more pop in there. Okay? So just get in there, push your values a little bit more, right? Get some nice whites in there. You can have some little dark gradients under part of this. Part of that, this is in shadow. That's going to have some gradients on there. Every time you have a roof tile overlap another tile, it's going to have a little bit of a like a gradient shadow where it's limiting the light from hitting. That roof tile is going to be darker. Okay. That's just going to help keep this area all here. So get some more highlights in there. A little bit of shadow coming around parts of that corner, right? Does that make sense? Okay, it's a good piece. All I did was just add a couple little highlights. Look at the difference, how it pops. Pushes those darks down, okay? Get in there, get some of that fine detail in there, all right? Good work. All right, who's this one? Okay, Alexandra. All right. Couple things that I noticed. Your roof tiles aren't going, they're traveling at sort of different angles. You know what I mean? And they're all equally spread out. So when we talk about suggestive detail, we want to think of having things in groups of like maybe 3, and then maybe a group of 2, and then maybe a couple on one end. Does that make sense? You're all in groups of 1, and they're all equally spaced out. You have like a quarter inch, and then if we come back to the horizon line, I can tell just by looking at them that some of the angles on the roof tiles, like look at this angle, that's going that way, but the building's going that way, right? So make sure you finesse that. That roof tile is going to be going downward in the direction to the vanishing point, okay? One of the things I'd recommend for you to do on your piece here is if you take off the line drawing, you should have the building shapes in there. Right now, you have, you know, there's some values in there, but it's not quite rendered out enough to give us a good feel of the structures on this main piece. What I mean by that is this right here, that value of that roof is almost the same value as here, right? Well, if the roof's tile, it's going to be darker. That might be a little bit darker on the top. What about the window frames? The window frames have no, they could be painted to be a little bit darker around there, right? You know, right now the tree in the back, there's light hitting it, but then, you know, what happens after that is there, you know, should be a little bit darker, should be some little highlights on there. By lowering your line down, you'll start to see the variance happening, okay? So if you turn off your line, you should have values that hold together. You should be able to see representation of shapes. If you turn off your line and you don't see that, that means you haven't pushed your values enough yet. You haven't gone in and tweaked some of the differences between them, okay? So right now, you have light side and dark side, that's working, right? But now we need to push it a step further, which is if this is a dark roof up here, okay, and if that's in shadow, okay, why can't that roof, what if that just happens to be a little bit darker than the building? That's just a tone. Like if you look at light blue and navy blue is going to read as a 6 or 7 as a value, right? Why? Because it's darker color. So your roof tile might be darker. That makes that a little bit darker than the building. Buildings tend to be painted with a light white or a light gray, right? So, and then you have window frames. Maybe the edging around these windows is darker. So if I come in there and I start to darken that out, okay? Right now you have that little frame there. You have this frame. They're all, none of them have been sort of painted, right? You're gonna have a gradient. We're talking about gradients today, okay? So we have a gradient that's coming in here, and it's going from dark to light. So when that shadow casts, it's going to come in here. That shadow is going to cast from here, and it's go from darker, and then it's going to lightly fade out and get lighter, 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 like so. And then it's lighter like that, okay? Just that little bit of a gradient control allows us to sense a little bit more about what's happening. Okay, your barrels right there. If I zoom into the barrels, right, there's nothing on the barrels. There's no highlight, there's no shadow, there's no side to it. So you need to come in here, you need to get a little bit of a dark side. See, and if I just do that right there on the barrels, it's starting to make them feel like light side and dark side. It's matching the light that's coming down. Your light right now, okay, it's not, your lines are very inconsistent here. Your light needs to feel like it's coming through. Look, your light is going to hit the edge right here. Do you see that? Your light's going to hit the edge of that building. So this is all going to be light in here. You need to make sure you're getting those specifics down in there. Okay, so that would be all light. And then if light's casting hitting this, you now have the shadow of this guy. So if the light's coming this way, this guy's going to cast a little bit of a shadow coming up and around part of this. You see that? You have a drop shadow. I think I mentioned this in the last class. You have a drop shadow from underneath this guy. This little element here is going to have a drop shadow underneath it, like so, from the direction of that light. So you need to make sure you're getting in there and you're getting all those elements and some of those details working together. Okay. Again, if I darken this one, I'm going to go a little bit lighter. I'm going to darken that because that's, as things recede back, they get a little bit lighter, right? Okay. So you need some of those variations. You had basic drawing, right? So in basic drawing, you were responsible for having gradations on elements going from dark to light, correct? That's part of the rendering phase. You need more of that rendering transpiring in here. Take your line drawing, thin your line drawing down, and get more of a feel of a light source, okay? Back here, you have, those are mountains, right? Mountains have planes on them. They have facades, okay? Right now, that feels like a mushy sort of marshmallow mountain, right? You have to be able to get in here, and you have to be able to feel like, hey, that's a front side to a facade. That's now the side that would be in shadow right there. That's light side, dark side, right? You need to get those shapes to turn back in there as well, okay? That's going to help you quite a bit. Again, it comes back to basic drawing and then back to rendering, understanding a front facade from a side facade, okay? So I'd go back in there. First thing I do is I tone down your line drawing to look at the piece and make sure it's reading correctly. The next thing I would do is I'd come in and I would start to adjust and get some more gradient and more, make sure the light's matching up. Like I said, you know, your lights, look, you have a shadow coming from around that building. Make sure it's nice and crisp on there. Have the shadow for this element that's in there. You know, what about the shadows back here on the trees? You have a tree back there. That tree should be casting a shadow that comes over like this. And then there should be a little bit of a highlight there, right? You need to make sure you get all these elements that represent part of the light that's coming through, okay? All right, thank you. Again, if you turn off your line, you'll see it immediately because the values won't hold together. So then you know you have to go back and work on the values a little bit more and get them to tuck in and tighten a little bit. Okay? All right, thanks, Alexandra. All right, next, Tem. So, and here's an example of that. Tem, I told her when I was looking at her stuff to take off her line. And some of her pieces, like this top piece here, that's starting to work because the line is really dissipating quite a bit. Okay, so Tem, on this one, couple fixes you have to do. This window over here is way too bright. See that? Right there? Let's do it in white. See that right there? It's way too bright. Okay. Here's your bright sort, your highlight. You don't even need to have that many windows on. If they're on, they're very light. It's nighttime, it's moonlight. You need to give that feel of that moonlight's coming through and it's hitting and putting little highlights, and you need more of that, what I just did on Jessica's piece, the gradient white. You need that gradient white hitting across the mountains. Your light source is way in the back. It's like multiple miles away. You have to feel your light coming in and gradating across some of the elements. Remember that gradation, the closer the elements, the brighter the contrast. Here, I see you doing it a little on the roof, right? But when we get up a little bit closer, you know, that's closer to there. So that's going to be a little bit brighter. Then when you get back here, part of this is going to have just a light pass on it, right? Gradating out. What about this? That's the top of a surface, right? Of a structure. That's going to be exposed to that light coming from there. That's going to have a highlight on it coming across. Okay? This light's coming from behind that building. This gets me confused. It's like a shadow back here going up that. I would take that off Heck, I would just come back in here and just paint that as a more of a base value. Blend your values together. Okay.
I was trying to give the impression that kind of buried cliffs and shadows in them.
Yeah, but before you do that, I know what you're going for. They're just getting too dark.
Oh, the whole piece is so complex and just didn't have time.
I told you you picked a
I know.
you know what I'm going to say, right?
Yeah.
You picked a hard subject matter. You picked a subject matter that's really complex with multiple buildings, multiple backgrounds, and now it's going to be a lot harder to get to a finished product because part of it's out of your batting range. Okay, but here's something you could do that could help you a little bit with this piece, right? You're going to have these little white highlights that are coming in here. You almost need to zoom into this. And they're going to go along part of these mountains. They're going to break over part of these tips. They're going to hit some of the different fronts here. They're going to hit some of the edges. So I'm just coming along here and trying to hit some of these little elements here. Hello? It's Bob Reynolds. It's Bob. So in your particular direction with this light coming in through here, right, you're going to see a lot of this little highlights. Okay, look, I can just take what's there right now. I'm going to hit H, hide my ants. I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to go to that light. Actually, let's use the one I just had there. I'm just going to come in here, and I have, oops, I need to switch to a bright white here. I'm just going to come across here and try to just hit some of these little highlights in here and just see if they pop out a little bit more. Oops, let's do the fuzzy. And then where they do pop out, I like to hit a little bit on the tops. Try to get these gradients to flow. Sometimes what you can do, if you forget where your ants are, you come back and punch it up a little bit. I'm going to go to like 60. Try to come along some edges and try to punch up a couple of these little highlights. And then across, and then what I like to do is come back to my brush and then just sort of blend them all in a little bit. That way I get the gradient fade off of where they're hitting. So do you see that valley feel now? You see the light spreading across there? You need to do that to the other side as well. And then you can get in here, try to pepper in some little highlights that also do the same thing. I hit it with a highlight and then I go down to like 20 or 30 and try to get a gradient to come off of that to feel like it's getting hit with light. And then there's a light side. There's a dark side. You have the reflective light on the back, right? Coming along some of these. Okay. And just if I do that, and I also come over here with my brush and I apply a little bit more of a gradient flow coming in here. And heck, you could even probably get away with a little bit of haze, a little bit of light blur. Atmospheric perspective blur coming from there. Okay, it might give you a little bit more of that feel of that of night, okay? Just allows the light to breathe a little bit more. See that? Okay.
Too dark in the castle.
I did. I threw a little bit down here, and I accidentally put it on your main layer. So sorry about that. I don't think wait, did I darken? No, I just threw a couple highlights in here and then I put another layer up on top. So, no, I didn't darken anything, but I would kill part of that light right there. I'm just going to paint over it, knock it down. Way too bright. Okay. You can have a couple little lights on like that, that's fine. But that's your main light source. So if you have these little lights on, you know, it's totally fine. Actually, you can use that to your advantage. You can just take a couple of these and copy and paste them. So like that. See how it starts to come alive a little bit more? You're adding a couple little highlights in there, sporadic. Now I'm just pasting the lights you already have. And, oops. Put them in pairs of 2s as well. See, just putting a couple of those lights in there really starts to also get it to come alive. So you just need to get a little bit more of that spread coming back. What I might do is see this mountain range here. What do you think about this? Uh-oh. Let me do this. I need to figure out how to do this real quick. Give me a second here. Let me get my layer. Let me compress all these layers into one real quick. So it's one light layer on the top. And then hold on, let me duplicate these layers real quick. Duplicate. Okay, I'm going to merge them. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to take what you had here, right in here. I'm going to take that and copy that, deselect, turn that layer off, and then I want to paste a new layer. So I took that mountain range you have there, I'm going to transform it. I'm going to flip it horizontal. I'm going to see if I couldn't find some way to like lightly get some more mountains in there on the back side like this. And then erase. I'm going to come over and erase these and blend these back in. See, I'm just throwing some more mountains on the other side so they can look like they're going to end up being behind oops. So I'm putting these mountains behind your other buildings here to get them to pop out a little bit more. Do you see that? And now it's creating more visual. So it's all about contrast, right? So I put those other mountain ranges behind on the back there. See what that does? Without that, you're blending into the sky. So now if you have some other mountains there, and I just took the ones you already had, altered them a little bit. Okay, let me delete that layer. And if I combine these together, so that's where we were. And you see with a little bit of the gradient read, you see what happens, and a couple of lights on there, it comes alive. So you get a little bit of light spreading through. You fix this structure, you get a couple windows on there as well, you know. Look, if I put another window over here, but it's further away, right? So it's got to be smaller. So, and not only smaller, but since it's further away, it's what? It's lighter. It's got to be a little, yeah, exactly. It gets a little bit darker. So, oh, I don't know where that other window is. That's okay. Actually, let me move that back over a teeny bit more. Put one there. Maybe have a vertical window up here. Look at that. The whole place comes alive all of a sudden. Okay? But the moon is way in the background there. So you have all these cliff fronts with multiple facades. Use that to your advantage and have the light sprinkling along those coming out towards the viewer. And then that, remember, what makes something feel real, guys? It's gradients. Dark to light transitions of light. And the way the gradients wrap over rocks and structures and grounds and stone and dirt is what's going to make something sort of come to life, okay? All right, so let me look. If I look at that and turn that on and off, boom, right? See that? Okay. I know you're going to ask me for this, but you don't want to ask it now. I'm going to save that one for you on my desktop because I know you ahead of time, and I know you're going to say, "Could you save that for me?" So I just put it on my desktop, okay? All right, thanks. All right, Serena. Okay, I need some shadows in there, right? She's all no comment. I'm sorry. Hold on a minute, guys. I need to stop the recorder. All right, Serena. Okay, so it's looking really good. I like your studies. Get that lock off there. Yeah, without a doubt, I think that's in the top one right there. This is also really good as well. How do you feel about that one too? The third one? Is that the one you chose? Because I saw the dark foreground, I was thinking this one. No, you went for this one. There's a nice softness that's happening in here with the light. So here, let's go and this is sometimes when we jump from here to here, this is the difference. So, and this night one would be fun too. What I would have done is maybe lit up the booth area. Like there's, and then one or two windows on the side. That would have been an option. But anyway, let's take a look at this. Okay, so light's coming from where? Huh? It's from the very back? For a minute there, yeah, it is coming from there. I'm having a hard time getting the shadow reads from there. I also was having a hard time. It got very wide over here, and it felt like maybe light could be coming this way. So you need to really define up those shadows a little bit more. And not in terms of value, just in terms of like very simple light detail. Okay? So if I come over here, and if I grab this, and let's say you have light that's coming out here, and it's hitting part of that, and that's shadow. Oops. Okay. If I put a layer above this, I go to brush, let's go to like 20%. And what's happening here? I'm in brush. There it is. I was in eraser again. Let's go to brush. Okay, and we want 20. Okay, deselect. And that's a little too rich and dark. I'm going to drop there. So yeah, that's just a soft little shadow, but have an edge to it. I can see what's happening back there with that. You're also going to have some light detail back here on the windows and stuff. It's not going to be empty like that, right? You're going to have some windows, some little bits of information, because light's coming across here. It's going to hit those little edges. We're going to see it. So let me just do a little bit I'm just thinking of a couple different things. One is like if light's coming from back here, this should be, if light's about here, like there, that shouldn't be, you need to have one facade be lighter. So I would darken this up a little bit and pretend the light's coming down a little bit more, because you have a little bit of a shadow. So I'm going to punch that down a little like so. In terms of time's sake, if you wanted to, we could just copy and paste a couple of these. So I could copy that. Oops, I knew that. So I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to take that window. I'm going to shrink it down here. Get it down in here. That feels pretty good. I'm going to go to levels real quick, and I'm going to lighten them up a little bit so they fade in a little bit more, right? There needs to be something there. I should be able to see, have some indication. And even if the perspective's a little bit off, that's okay. Just go to distort, grab one area, maybe lean it a little bit more or whatever. Okay, should be able to see something in there that's coming across for light. Same thing in here. If I come back over here as well, hold on, let me just keep working for a minute. I want to come back here. I think I should have a little bit more shadow coming in from here, going around part of this, coming from part of your light source there. Okay, so if I go into my brush and X2, okay, select. As these items come back to me, they should get a little bit richer. Values should get a little bit darker. Okay. Again, if that light's casting here, have a shadow that casts up here over all this stuff, right? From that guy. How did I create a group? Hold on. Uh-oh. Oops. Must be another hotkey in here where I did that. Darkening a little bit of that underneath is going to get those fish to pop out a little bit more. This overhang is going to be all dark up in here. A little bit of a gradient drop off there. Come back here. I'm going to lightly darken this back side of the building a little bit more to get that a little bit more pronounced. Okay, you have part of this, you have the stripes in that overhang. A little bit of a gradient coming down there, a little bit darker. Okay, you have the back side of these overhangs right here. Oops. I wasn't paying attention and I hit minus instead of plus. Oops, and I can't see drawing over my own hand. Okay. See what's starting to happen a little bit more? As I'm pushing some of your values a little bit more. Heck, I almost just want to I want to cover this negative here to keep me focused here because they're getting so much contrast. So, and distort it, try to match the perspective up and drop that down a little bit more like that. There, and then I'm going to come in here with erase. I'm going to erase the parts. There. So now I don't have a negative spot. So I just pasted that over there, right? So like you see that, it's not an empty spot anymore, right? It just fills it up a little bit, and I took what you had, which is really simple. And actually, it makes sense. If light's coming from that side, it also would hit the back alley right there, right? You don't even notice that came from there, right? So you just put it in there. So you see a little bit more darks, a little bit more lights. It's just helping it edge along. If light's coming back down here, part of this also might be in a little bit more shadow as well. You have that side of that canopy. Oop, that's way too dark. Let's go back down to about a 20. Now, one of the things, you know how I did Tim's piece and we talked about getting that read of white hitting across? You can't get that read right now of white hitting across your buildings. You know why? They're all too light. So here's how you fix that. You come over here and you take a layer and you're going to put it on the top like this. And it's I always find this easier to work from dark to light. So I'm gonna come over here and select like a little bit of a darker gray like this, and then say edit, and I'm gonna say fill, and fill that whole thing with color. And I'm gonna come down here, and I'm gonna put this on to multiply, and then I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna adjust the opacity of it like this. So all I'm doing is taking the tone that you have there right now, and I'm putting just a little layer over it. And the reason why I'm doing this is now if I come back with white inside here to paint, my white highlights are going to show because I just notched up your piece about 20% in value. So that's still even a little bit too, let me bring it down a little bit more. So now if I come in here with white, and let's come in with like a 30, if I start putting in little highlights, coming across part of this, maybe there's some here, maybe there's a little bit up there, a bit more hitting over here, maybe here, and then as let's say your sun is back in here, let's say. So I'm starting to brighten that up a little bit more. Maybe part of your sun is like right in here and it's more round, right? Okay, and then allows me now to come in and sort of punch up and say, okay, there's going to be light coming through parts of here. It's going to be, light's going to travel down in here. It's going to be spreading all through here. It's going to be a little bit brighter. It's all going to be brighter at the source, right? Coming back through. So I'm starting from where it's really bright, and then I'm punching and bringing that light back up and through over, right? And then if it gets too much, just come in here, switch to a hazy brush, and then just start to like punch it up a little bit where you get that sun sort of coming through. Do you see that? So now I'm getting a much better feel of your light. And the reason why I get that feeling of a better spread is just because I have a little bit darker values to work with. Now I can go in here and I could paint the light hitting where I want it to hit in terms of highlights. That makes sense? Okay, and then even you're going to have these cobblestones. You're going to come into your, some of these are going to be hit with little highlights on top, right? See how it has a little bit more of a morning feel now? And then if I still haven't even touched clouds yet. I could come up here and start getting under some of the clouds. Getting these little, you know, little gradients here. Cloud base there of some kind coming up, and now I get that feel that light is really coming through part of my scene because I'm getting the gradient in there, right? Remember, we tend to get little highlights on things and then they fade off. Little highlight fades off. A little bit more of a highlight on the end, fades off. We get, oh, if I did your sign, I screwed that up somehow. Let me fix it. Sorry. You have a little sign there, right? So back to the light, and get a little bit of light. Oops. What am I at right now? I'm at 80%. So I'm going to go at about 40 or 50. So that way I touch once or twice and I get 100. And then I sort of really lightly drop down to like a 20 and fade it off a little. And hit that little bit of a lip. Light's coming through there. Keep it pretty light. Sort of fade it up, fade it across. See that? The light's way back there, but it's still going to spread in part of this. I don't even know what it looks like on that demo, but these monitors are like always 30% a little bit lighter. They're a little bit off in terms of color. So I'm down to like 10% because this is a little, you know. And if I want to in there to really get that to pop, I can put a little bit of grit, right? I could come up to a texture brush like this. I have a couple of different texture brushes, and these actually work really good for getting some highlights to pop out sometimes on certain objects. They work better when they're a little bit brighter and a little bit larger, but oops. So I'm just sort of going along, tapping it in a couple spots, and it leaves a little bit of texture, and then I just come in here, hit erase, go back down to clean the edges up, and then hit erase and go back to like 20, and then I just sort of lightly fade it in. So it looks like a little bit of dirt and grime. You see that? So now I get that, pops out a little bit more. I still like the thought of this being a little bit richer, that overhang here, right, in the foreground. And then come back and remember how light's going to hit that. Okay? So if I have this here, and I come back to my light source again, I'm going to have light hitting across the flat part of the tiles, right? A little bit of light might be hitting there. A little bit of light might be hitting that little edge. There it is, very subtly. Maybe there's a little bit of light there. Maybe a little bit of light there. It gets this just to read just a teeny bit. See that? Then I come back in. Let's put some more highlights in there. You have this little edge here that might be getting hit. Nice. You have some of the edges of the box right there. It's getting a little bit brighter, but that's okay. You can dull it down a little bit, or I can erase it a little. So see how much more pronounced it is now? And if I think that that's too much haze, let me see if I had it on another layer. What layer did I put it on? I put it on that layer, of course. I fell on the wrong layer. That's all right. I can even still, that was at 33%, I can still knock it down. If I knock it down, it gets a little bit more intense, a little brighter. So I like it being about, that wasn't bad about there, it's about the 33%. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, that's what I was looking for. My highlight layer, if that's too intense, there, now I'm knocking it down to about 82. Okay? And I could still, it's a little bit brighter up on that monitor. I could still go down to about there. So do you see what happened by me adding in that value layer? Value layer. I've been talking for too long, right? It does a lot to help tone things down a little bit and allow you to adjust the values. Okay, so if I combine all that together, look at the difference. Oops. Hold on, that's one of the problems when you have something on multiply sometimes. When you combine it, it does some weirdness to it. So it's better for me to leave it right now, because if I combine those layers, watch the jump. See how it adjusted it a little bit? It's multiply coming into normal layers, so I'd rather just leave it like this and, you know, merge it together. But if I take all three of those off, look at the difference. See how it's sort of blowing out? There's a lot happening. By adding a little bit more value, working back up off that value, it's going to enable you to get in there and tone down and get a better sense and feel of light coming across. Okay? All right, my pleasure. Let me save it. I know everyone's going to be like, save my file! Save my file! I don't even know how I'm saving it. Just put it on the desktop. All right. So we're almost done in just a minute here. And sorry, don't mean to go this long on all of these, but we'll finish up in a second here. All right, Matt. So, Matt, the biggest thing I'm sensing when I'm looking at these is I'm not feeling the gradients in there. You know what I mean? The dark to light transitions, right? The gradients that are in there. I think you're a great candidate for this to get in here. You need to have some of those gradients taking place, right? And remember, I talked about the line, about thinning that line down. By the way, I love that structure so much better. It fits the time period, right? Before you had like an air conditioner in the middle of nowhere, right? So we got to get in here, and you have these shadows casting. You're going to have little bits and gradients, and the same thing with the highlights. You're going to have highlights coming from different angles. So watch what I'm going to do just really quick. I'm going to go through here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little pass going with a little bit more darks in here. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. I'm going to see if I can darken this up a little bit more. That's a little too bright. Dull it down just a little bit. There we go. Darken part of that. Come in on part of this tree. Darken this. Darken the back of that hill maybe a little bit more. Okay, I have the side of this house right here. I'm going to have, it's going to be a little bit darker. Light's coming this way, right? So that's going to be hit with a highlight. So some of this is going to be gradated. That's the dark side of the object. That's the shadow side, right? So you're not going to have that huge highlight there. Part of that iron door or gate's going to be knocked down. So I'm just going to gradate this whole side back right now. Okay. You're also a candidate for lowering part of your line. Your line gets a little thick up here. If you lighten it down a little bit easier to read. Light's coming this way, right? So this will also be, secondary. This will be third in terms of darkness. There's going to be limited light hitting between these two structures right here. I'm going to come over here, try to darken this down a little bit. Okay. These roofs, okay, these roof pillars, excuse me, stacked layers here. A little bit of where that overhang is there. Okay. Now I have a little bit darker value in there, and it's going to allow me, it'll help frame part of this. Look, even up here though, going to have a little bit darker in there, have a little bit darker value in there. That shadow has no gradient coming off of it, right? It's going to be a little darker here and then fade upwards, right? It's going to fade this way a little. This value here is the same value as it is here. If that's light's coming from there, this is going to be a little bit lighter. So you're going to have some light adjustments in there where it might be a little bit lighter here, and then it sort of works its way, especially between that other building and there. It's going to work its way this way and then get a little bit lighter. There's going to be a gradient in there. It gets a bit lighter to that edge, right? Okay. Same thing in some of your mountains back there too. All right. Now, see the difference? Just a little bit of those values. It starts to get in there and bring some of your piece a little bit more together where we can see some of the other highlights coming through that you have in here. And you still can come back here and punch up a little bit more of those highlights. Okay, so if I come over here, oops. I'm going to get that. There's a lot of light back there, right? Hitting back in there. So as that light comes through here, light's going to come right across here, and it's going to start to fade out. It's going to start to then spread going across part of this, right? It's going to be brighter here. You're going to have a little bit of a highlight hitting part of that building, and part of that highlight is going to start to fade down with the direction of the light that's coming through. Okay? You have the underneath here to this, the back side. This is in shadow side right here, right? That should be shadow there. Back of this should be a little bit more shadow. There should be a gradient in your shadow where it goes dark, like this, and then it starts to fade off and get a little bit lighter. Okay? So it's a little darker on there, a little darker there. That back side's in shadow. It's not going to be, that's the same as the front. It's not. That's going to be a little bit darker there. This barrel has nothing on it. That should be, this can be in a little bit more shadow. Okay? So then we have the effect of the light that's coming in. You have light coming through here. You're going to have light hitting little parts of this little, couple parts of that wall going up there, right? That might be a little bit lighter. That might be a teeny bit lighter on that edge. Some of these bricks might be getting hit with a little bit of light. Okay? So you need to get in there. You need to get a little bit more of these gradients. Here you're already at a pure white right there. See that? You're almost a same candidate for what I talked about if I throw, hold on a minute. Let me keep those highlights there. Let me put a layer above. I want to come over here because your whites have almost been exhausted pretty much. I'm going to take this, edit, I'm going to fill that as a pure color. Okay. And then I'm going to put that on multiply. I'm going to come in here with levels. There's levels. Oh, there they are. So what I'm lightening that up a little bit. Let me show you the difference though. See, I'm going to go a little bit lighter. Now you can see your white highs. You see the difference? I put like a 10% grade on there. Now that allows me to see if you have a cloud in there that's white, I can see it. You're going to almost a little bit pure white. So I could have a cloud in the sky right back up in here. And I could be able to see that. I can see the highlights. Part of the highlights might be hitting part of that cloud come through. Okay? I can see the highlights hitting this building. I'd be able to get up in there, see a little bit more of the light coming through on that edge, maybe hitting a little bit in here as well, spreading across part of the ground, coming up the wall. See all those little elements? That roof is the same value as that wall. I don't think so. That's going to be, if that's a roof and a tile, they tend to be a little bit darker. If I make that a little bit darker now and I come in, I put a little bit of value. Light's coming from back here, and there's going to be a little bit of shadow underneath. All right? Then I have this other roof line that's going to have a little bit of shadow. I'm going to come in here, start to render that out a little bit more. Okay? All right? Okay? Erase. Let me go down. I want to lighten it just a teeny bit. Got a little dark. Okay? So right now I start to get a much better read. I added a 10% grade. I can see the whites a little bit more. Okay, so watch. If I take all this and see if I compress it, if there's much. Nope. The multiply won't work well with me. It doesn't want to allow me to change. Okay? So I'm going to leave the multiply. Let me just turn off the layers. Ready? Oop. So there we were. So there's no feel of gradients. There's no dark to light. There's no transitions. I made it a little bit darker. And then I get some of those gradients and some of those transitions in there. And look at how the piece comes to life. See that? Okay, there's a lot more value change happening in there. You need those gradients. You need the dark to light. The dark to light has to be happening in there. That makes the piece feel like light is coming through there and transitioning into it. Okay? All right, thank you, sir. Okay? Yep.
I think you forgot to grab mine.
Did I?
I think so.
Hold on a
I
minute.
sent it yesterday, kind of earlier.
Okay. You know what? Hold on.